Hello and welcome to the Psychic Stories podcast, encouraging conversations about mental health. Today I'm speaking to Jon Toms. Jon is passionate about emotional and mental health and loves helping people understand who they truly are. Jon, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Matt.
How are you getting on?
Good. I'm actually pretty happy at the moment because I'm down in Cornwall, locked down. I don't live here, but I've been down here since Christmas on an extended lockdown break. So I've got the view of the sea. I've got a couple of my family members. So I'm definitely taking some time out, which is good.
You are, and also making all the other listeners very jealous.
I know. Yeah, I've been particularly quiet on social media because I just feel bad admitting that I'm here even. So
Yeah,
I'm keeping quiet.
But also at the end of the day, if, like you say, that's where you're from and you're there, take advantage of it, right?
No, well, I am. I had pasty for lunch today. I saw the sea. I'm happy.
Sounds like a dream. So, Jon, the goal today is to have an open and honest conversation about your mental health journey, to get some insight into the tools, techniques that have helped you and are available and accessible to other people. And by discussing your journey, we hope to share and normalise conversations about mental health, as often people are not alone in these experiences. That sound good?
Sounds great. Yes.
Cool. And now to the big question, Jon Toms, who are you? Or just tell us about your mental health journey.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks. Well, thanks again for having me on. I am definitely on that journey of who am I? Like something I find really, really important in life, and haven't always been aware of this, but the importance of who I am over what I do. Like what I do can be important as well, but I really believe that who we are is really, really important, and discovering who I am has been really important for finding out what I want to do. So I think my journey has definitely been a journey of self-discovery and really learning to actually love who I am. And I think I didn't really realize until my kind of early 20s that I actually had to engage with myself. I'm going to spend a lot of time with myself, possibly like 80, 90 years, however long I'm going to live. And I've got to get on with this person. I've got to actually like this person. And I actually grew up in Cornwall. I don't live there now, but growing up, it's funny being down here now actually, because I'm getting a lot of triggering memories of like my teenage years down here. Very insecure, very underconfident, didn't do great at college, like all these kind of very lacking self-worth, like all these kind of really negative connotations with where I grew up. Even though it's a beautiful place, it's very triggering emotionally to be here. So I think my story's definitely been a story of embracing who I am, letting go of things that I'm not anymore, and really stepping into the more kind of like a deeper confidence and a deeper security of who I am as a man.
And it's interesting because, like, you've got, like you said, it like you're trying to embrace who you are. Like when you come out of school, college, whatever's happening, like it's not about who you are; it's about what you're about to do. There's a lot of emphasis on what you do, and whilst that is important, like I think you are what you've done in the past. It doesn't necessarily what you do in the future. What you say you do isn't necessarily who you are. And I think having, like you said, that reconciliation between who you know you are, who you actually are, against who you say you are and what you actually do is a really important reconciliation to have. Like you said, people talk about authenticity, originality, like to have that reconciliation from outside to in is so important. It sounds like you've been on that journey, and that's what at one stage that wasn't reconciled. And I'd love to hear a bit more about like what did it feel like when you weren't reconciled? Like did you feel you were quite lost?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny because some of my family members are like, oh, especially my nans, they always would say we were really worried about you when you were younger. You were very underconfident. Like we never thought you were quite gonna like make it through life almost. I don't know what they quite meant by that, but I was like, what did you think I was gonna die of underconfidence?
Thanks,
but
Nan.
I think thanks, Nan. But I don't think they would believe what I do now, because I do a lot of public speaking. I love public speaking. I do podcasts. Like I enjoy these sorts of things because I've grown in confidence. But if I was to be told that when I was kind of 14, 15, 16, 17, even like into my early 20s, maybe that would not have crossed my mind at all, just because I did not have the confidence of who I was. So the only reasons I can do these things now is because I've stepped into a certain level of assurance of knowing that I'm enough. And I think a lot of it comes back to that question, am I actually enough? And I still have to question myself today. Like to this point, I still get hit with that every now and again. And with this pandemic hitting and kind of stepping into uncertainty again, I'm getting asked that again. I'm having to go back to the core of who I am and be like, Jon, are you actually enough? Like, do you actually match up? Do you have what it takes? All these questions keep coming at me. So I've realized those questions aren't going to go away. So what you really need to make sure is that you have a strong core, you have a strong foundation.
Yeah.
And when you do get asked those questions, you can respond with a loving response.
And do you find like, so when you were younger, like, did you have these questions? Because it certainly seems like you've gone through a process, you've gone inside, and these questions have either emerged or you've asked yourself them and looking for like answers. Like when you were, let's say, they said 13, 14, 15, and you were lacking in confidence, were those questions still there? Or was it a certain moment where you were like, right, Jon, I've got to start looking inside, something's not quite right, and I don't want to go on for the next 60 years like this?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because even as you're asking it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I don't think I was at all self-aware, and I don't think you are massively self-aware at that age. And I think the hard thing at that age, all you really care about is being accepted in your friendship group. You just want to have friends, you just want to be cool, you just want to be enough, I guess, but you don't know what enough is, because you don't really have the emotional intelligence for it at that age, or the self-awareness. So I think, honestly speaking, I probably had too much shame around it to really connect with my heart about who I was anyway. Didn't have the self-awareness, didn't have the emotional intelligence, and didn't really know that I had to make powerful decisions myself. I thought I was just a leaf in the wind, and I would just blow through life and everything would be okay. It wasn't until I got older I was like, oh, I actually get to choose what kind of life I lead. I'm not a victim to my life. I'm not a victim to this kind of powerless emotion that I'm feeling. So honestly, at that age, I just think I was completely oblivious to me being able to change how I feel about myself. So great question. I don't know whether that answered it, but that's definitely how I felt.
Yeah, no, understood. But I think, like, but at what stage did you start to gain that
Yeah.
self-awareness or realize that? Because like you said, like that, I think that analogy is brilliant, that leaf in the wind. I think that's how a lot of people feel, and maybe feel into their 30s, 40s, 50s, they're still feeling like that leaf in the wind. Like, and I think there's that choice. Do you want to be the leaf, or do you want to be the tree?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So what happened to you? Like, what gave you that self-awareness?
Yeah, I would say another great question. Do you know what? I love getting asked great questions, by the way, and you're throwing some good ones this
You're
way.
very kind. I'm just interested.
Yeah, no, it's great. For me, it was probably around the age of 20 to, yeah, it was at my brother. I remember it was at my brother's wedding, and I was sat next to someone, and again they probably asked me a great question, and I just thought, like, what am I actually doing with my life? Like, I was going out drinking a lot, and just I was doing that to cover up and to mask for the fact that I wasn't confident in who I was. So I was like, I don't really have much connection with these people that I'm drinking with. Like, I'm just not confident enough to actually be myself. So I actually moved from Cornwall to London at that point. And so I was 21. So I think that was the age where I was like, I don't know who I am. Like, I need to go on a journey of self-discovery, and I need to leave the kind of family home and step out and actually become an adult. So I think it was that kind of breakaway from home, and that breakaway from living in this kind of place of uncertainty, and stepping out into a place where I was like, I need to discover who I am. And one of the most important things was being around other people, and that's why I'm really passionate about kind of teaching on healthy community now. Like, get around the right people, get around the people that are going to call out your bad stuff, but also call out your good stuff and call out the gold within you, and get around people that will call you to a higher standard. Because I started to be around people that were encouraging me, and they were telling me things that I didn't believe about myself. I was like, oh, I didn't know that's who I was, but they were speaking this kind of life and this encouragement over me. And I was like, wow, I don't believe that, but I want to believe that. So I'm going to work really hard to believe it. So probably in my early 20s, I really started to go on that journey of self-discovery. And it looked like looking within, but also looking outside, like, who's around me? Like, who can I get around me that's already further on this journey? And I had multiple people around me that were further on that journey, kind of friendships, mentors, leaders, people I worked with, and just hung around those types of people that were powerful and that were emotionally intelligent and that were invested in me as a person. So I think that's when I first started really, delving into the fact that I was powerful over my own growth. And was able to kind of step into a whole new kind of part of who I was. And in my mid-20s, I went over to California for 3 years. So I lived in California for 3 years. I was at a personal development school out there. My faith is Christian, so it was a Christian-based faith school, but really kind of focused on personal development. So that was intense. That was a lot of like inner work, inner healing, personal development, but amazing as well. So really kind of grew in my mid early to mid 20s and still
Yeah.
growing now. I'm 31 now.
Yeah, well, I mean, but it sounds like the most incredible like turnaround, like from your perspective, like, and did you have a goal in mind, like, or did you just have this feeling that you knew you had to effectively be on this path and this journey, like, and the fact that, or were there multiple journeys spread out in front of you, and you saw a few of them, and you're like, if I go down what I'm currently, if I currently behave and think how I currently do, then I can see 20, 30, 40 years down the line, and I'm not actually necessarily happy with that, because it seems like what you were doing in some respects were trying to design, almost like redesign who you were, and say, actually, I want to put these core elements into my life, and once I've got those elements, I will trust, because you can't be certain, I will trust that those elements will lead to things that I know will be empowering for myself.
Yeah, I think one of my main goals in life is really simple. It's like love and be loved. Like make sure you can receive love, and make sure you're really good at giving love, because I genuinely believe like the hope for this world is each other and the love that we carry within. And sometimes that can sound really cheesy and cliche, but it's not. Like the only thing that's going to get us through every single day is being unconditionally loved, and connection, and human connection. Like the reason this pandemic is so hard, yes, there's lots of people dying, but the reason it's so hard for most of us that are they're in it, because we're being disconnected. Like the very thing we were created to do has been taken away from us, which was connection. Like we were created to connect with one another on like a relational level, and we're having that taken away from us. So that's really, really hard for our minds to compute. That's why so many people are having anxiety and falling into depression. Like our minds weren't designed to be disconnected, they were designed to be connected. Like the way our minds fire up in conversations like this, for example, is crazy. If you were to look into the mind, and if you were to delve into that, it's wild what happens to our mind when we connect with one another. So when that's taken away, it's not fun. Like and that's why we're struggling. It's really, really hard right now to go through this pandemic. So my passion and my goal in life is to be the most connected to myself, the most connected to God, and the most connected to those around me. And that's what I'm really passionate about, is basically how can I teach people to connect with one another, but really connect with themselves as well, because a lot of my story was disconnection from myself. So I only cared about the people around me. I thought my whole role in my 20s was to love everyone around me, serve everyone, counsel everyone. I was always the person that people would come to, but that's because I was presenting myself in that way. So I very much opened the doors and said, yeah, come to me, like abuse my time, that's absolutely fine. And they weren't doing that. I was doing that because I had no boundaries. So I had to go on the journey of loving myself. I was really good at loving other people, but I disregarded myself because I was willing to kind of put all my needs to one side for someone else, which is great sometimes. Like it's good to be selfless, but to do it with boundaries will give you longevity. So yeah, I guess that's my goal, to love and be loved.
Which to be honest is I say is the admirable goal you can have, right? Like if you could achieve, if you could get, I always talk about this idea of deathbed thinking. If I can lie on my deathbed and taking your goal, if I was to think that I have loved and I am loved, I mean, that's awesome, right? I think there was I was on a train once. I think I was going to like some football rugby game, and there was a guy that, and I'll never forget it, probably a pearl of wisdom from probably going to see Watford up where you are. And he said no one wants to be the richest guy in the graveyard. And I took my earphone out and I was like, that's the most wise Buddhist thing I've heard in probably the last 10 years, and that's through my journey of self-awareness. And it makes you really think. It's actually, it's a lot of stuff we do which is focused on material things, and something that this pandemic has shown is that actually we can do without a lot of these. And actually, like deathbed thinking, do you want to be loved and and be loved, but then at the same time, do you want to be someone who doesn't love and the wealthiest guy in the graveyard? And you're kind of like, well, actually, like, to me, that's a really easy choice, right? Because it puts that thing about I'm accumulating stuff but doesn't have any emotional connection to that stuff, compared to actually having some really rich, and that's the exact word you want to use, is rich connections with people. And I think you say during this pandemic, like, having these conversations is are awesome. Like I'm privileged to be speaking to you about this, and it does fire you up. But a Zoom call isn't the same, is it? It's not the same as meeting up with your mates. There's so much you miss out on. So whilst I certainly agree, this is good enough, but it's certainly not the aspiration. And I'm certainly looking forward to in 6 months, 9 months time, when we can start to get back, and hopefully with a bit more self-awareness of ourselves. And something I wanted to ask was, with actually in similar parallels to my life, with around your faith. I'm not a religious person myself. However, I grew up initially in a non-religious household, which very quickly became religious. So I saw both sides, made my choice. But from your perspective, I'd love to understand how faith played that part, because for something that I certainly know is that the questions that I was asking when I was 10, 11, 12, who am I? What am I doing? Like, they actually, my mum had no answers, so she actually went to church to find them. And I know that church and faith and whatever religion you are, synagogue, Muslim, they provide a framework for those answers, and they've been thought out over thousands of years. And I'd be interested to hear about your experience of that.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I think my faith's obviously hugely important. So I grew up in a faith household as well, and my parents, I kind of grew up going to church, and it was very much, when I was younger, it felt like a almost duty and a religion. Whereas when I left the home and going into my kind of adult years, and me understanding what it really looks like to have Christian faith, is to really be in relationship with this God, which is really difficult for people to get their head around, because it's not something you can see. But God to me represents everything that I think the world needs, which is unconditional love. So talking about being loved and loving earlier, the only reason I can do that, I believe, is because I have access to unconditional love every day. So because of my relationship with God, and I don't step into kind of the religion side of Christianity, I think that's the side that's really damaged people in the church, outside the church, and anyone listening that's been hurt by the church, I'm genuinely sorry by that, and I'm sorry for that, and I'm sorry that you have heard what the church is against rather than for, because the church is actually for some really incredible things, but there's also some incredibly broken people, like anywhere in the church. And I take responsibility for that. And it's hard seeing how many people have been hurt by the church when it's supposed to be something that's all loving and unconditionally loving. So for me, God represents unconditional love. So every single day I wake up knowing that I'm unconditionally loved by God. So I don't have to go searching for that in material things. I don't have to go searching for that in my purpose. I don't have to go searching for that anywhere else but him. So, and I'm not saying I live a perfect life because of that. I don't believe that every day. Like, sometimes I wake up and I don't believe that, and I have to really push in. And even today, actually, I was just voice noting my friend, and he was reminding me of something, like a scripture in the Bible about peace. And I was like, yes, I've totally forgotten about accessing peace, through God. And I think he represents all these things that we struggle to find in life sometimes. So I think for me, I've always kind of got that unconditionally loving father, because he's known as Father as well in our faith, which is incredible, because our relationships on earth are not perfect. They're far from perfect. So I think for me, it represents something steady and steadfast. Through this whole pandemic, my view of God hasn't changed. He hasn't changed. He's still kind of steadfast. When everything around me is crumbling, he's been steadfast. So it kind of it fuels me. It fuels what I do, my whole purpose. I believe that I'm walking in God's plan for my life. It kind of fuels everything that I do. So it's important to me.
And I can really see that. And actually, I think thinking about it from someone like myself, who doesn't necessarily have that relationship with a God, is I can see how that would achieve every morning, waking up and have some inner peace. And effectively a big sigh of release. Say, do you know what? I'm trusting everything's going to be okay. If I go out and be an honest person, etc., and the person I want to be, I will follow that plan. And like I said, I think there's a huge aspect, and such power to faith. And it doesn't necessarily need to be Christianity. It could be Judaism, Sikhism, it could be Buddhism. There's a lot of options, but I do think that when we talk about mental health and mental well-being, I do think faith can play a big part, and that faith doesn't necessarily be affiliated with any form of religion, but taking those principles. And certainly I went through a journey of looking at many different faiths and say, okay, which one do I fit in with? Much like a political party, who are you going to vote for? Which one do I fit in? And I realize actually there's probably little bits of all of them where I can put together and come to a similar conclusion, where I can wake up every day. I think the one thing I do struggle with is that if you go down that route and you're nitpicking from lots of different things, when you have a fundamental question, you don't really know where to look. Whereas I think what's really helpful, like from your perspective as well, is that there is a well-trodden path, and I assume some very interesting experienced mentors who can really guide you through that process.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think again, it's being around the right people that put you in a safe enough place and are in a safe enough relationship with you to let you have those deep questions, and whatever faith you're discovering, like, make sure you're really asking those hard questions, and you're not just following it out of religion. And it's yeah, I see it a lot in Christianity. It's like, are you actually in this relationship with God, or are you just kind of stepping into religion because you were brought up in religion? And I think yeah, like you say, faith has a massive impact on our emotional and mental health. Like, I really believe God cares about our heart. He created it. So I think to not care about your heart is kind of dishonoring to God, really, as well. So yeah, I think absolutely, just get in a place, if you've not discovered faith before, like, ask those questions and ask if there's anything bigger out there than yourself and the people around you. Like, I think humans are the most incredible. This is why I'm so interested in kind of emotional health and mental health and wellness. Like, I think we're the most incredible humans ever, like species. Just what we can do, what we can achieve when we come together and when we collaborate together, and like I say, when we have conversations and our minds and our hearts connect, it's incredible. Like, it's literally incredible. And we are what's going to heal mental health. Like, I genuinely believe that. Like, I genuinely believe the biggest healer of mental health is human connection. Like, yes, I believe in therapy, I have therapy, yes, I believe in medication, like, I believe in all that stuff, but these kind of conversations can genuinely bring such healing when they're done safety, when they're done in kind of boundaried conversations. Like, empathy is so powerful, compassion is so powerful. Like, all of these things, when we've taught ourselves that we're rejectable or we're unlovable for so many years, when we've taught our mind that, but then we get told the opposite in a few years' time, it's so healing. Like, it's so healing when you've believed a certain thing about yourself, and then you can sit down and have a conversation where someone can tell you the opposite and validate your emotion, validate that feeling of feeling unlovable. It's incredibly healing. So I think we're amazing.
I agree with you, but I think it's incredibly healing, but also at the same time, it can be incredibly confusing. Like, often those thoughts and the kind of internal chatter has been created during those kind of formative years, during, you know, when you're at school, 13 through 18, when you have these very, you know, experiences, your brain's changing a lot, and also your brain is solidifying into those kind of thought patterns, which is going to take you on. If you find out mid-20s that actually what the assumptions that you had about life were incorrect, whilst it's great to think, oh yeah, well, do you know what, I am loved, that's awesome, but then you've still got to stop that negative chatter. And if they, you know, and from your perspective, like, you know, I see you very openly talked about your lack of confidence when you were younger. Like, that will, I assume, will be associated with some stuff that you're telling yourself. How did that change? Like, how did your internal monologue change, or did it change? Do you still have those doubts, but you can actually just say, no, actually, I don't believe you anymore, or I don't believe that side of my thoughts anymore?
Well, yeah, it's definitely not a quick process, and like what you were just saying, like, a lot of the formative years are so vital and like pivotal in our lives, because, well, that's why they're called formative years. Like, thoughts are formed and feelings are formed, and certain circumstances that we go through or events that we go through can really have like a trauma on our mind and our heart and our belief system. So yeah, 10 years down the line, time hasn't healed. Like, time doesn't heal. Like, it genuinely doesn't. It helps a little bit, but that trauma is never going to go away, and in 10 years time you're going to get triggered. It's going to take you back to that trauma, and you're going to act out of your child self. And that's kind of what happens to me when I come back to Cornwall, because I'm around my family. Like, I'm around familiar smells, sights, feelings, like all those things that trigger certain responses from my childhood. So this is why therapy is really important, because actually sometimes we need to go back to pain points, and we can't always do that with our friends. We need to do it in like a boundary setting of therapy. So going back to those thoughts and going back to those feelings, going back to those traumas, and actually rewiring your mind. I've totally forgotten what your question was. I went off topic.
I was going to say, no, but I think it's a perfect tangent, because like you said, it's revalidating those assumptions. It's like your childlike self would have formed some assumptions during that time, but actually going back to those assumptions and challenging them, because you know, your memory isn't you know, isn't infallible. Like your memory
Yeah.
is manipulative in some respects. Can you trust it? And going
Yeah.
back and speaking to certain people and addressing these conversations, like you said, in a boundaried environment, but also speaking to the people who were involved at the time, your parents, your friends, your siblings, whoever they were, like, you know, actually your perceptions of that situation might have been completely wrong. However, that doesn't mean that that would have had a traumatic effect over a period, you know, over that period of your life. So, and I think what the question I was, you know, asking was around that kind of that process. How did that kind of internal chatter, or maybe negativity, change into something that's a little bit more constructive and positive for you?
Yeah. Yes. Good. Thanks for clarifying that. So it's definitely like self-compassion is probably one of the greatest tools and gifts I would teach people. Like really get to know and look up and read about and practice self-compassion, because what needs to happen, so when I go back to like little Jon, for example, when he was 12, 13, 14, trying his best. I'm also one of 5.
Good old little Jon.
Good old little Jon. I know, let's get little Jon out. And I'm one of 5, so I was the middle child. So I had 2 elder siblings, and they just seemed to like always pass their driving tests first. They would be sports captain. Their team would win at school, and I would always I would win, but not quite enough. So I passed not the first time my driving test, second time. I was captain, but my team didn't win that year. And there was so many, and my GCSEs, like I did okay, but not great. So there was always things that were like telling me at that moment that I wasn't quite enough. I wasn't quite good enough. Like you were okay, but you weren't quite good enough. So I think what I learned back then was that, like, I taught myself at that age that, Jon, you're never quite going to be good enough. Like you'll be able to show up a bit, but you're never going to be good enough. So that was something I taught myself. And I also kind of taught myself that I was the class clown. Like I love to make people laugh. That was something I could thrive at college and school. So I did thrive at that. I was like, I'm going to make this whole class laugh all day. But that really just kicked out of college because of that reason. And yeah, so I was forming these views and opinions and teaching my mind who I wasn't, basically, who I thought I was, but I wasn't. So 10 years down the line, I was still believing those things. So that's why I took a big chunk of time out. That's why I went to America for 3 years. Like I was out there not having a holiday in the sun. I was out there dealing with a lot of pain and a lot of trauma and a lot of things that I didn't believe about myself, or did believe about myself, that I needed to rewire.
And what's the reaction been when you came back and you inserted yourself back into your family setting, your friend setting? Like, I assume they noticed a change.
I'd love to say that. Well, like, yes, they did, but you think, it's a very interesting thing to go through such a change and then see everyone else's reaction, because they haven't been there with you, so they haven't seen you gradually change. They've seen you quite dramatically change. So or they've not acknowledged that you've changed, which is probably the hardest part, and they treat you like you're the same. So that was actually quite hard. I came back to my kind of friendship group, for example, and it felt like I was still treated the same, which was incredibly triggering as well for some reason. I don't know whether I've really explored why that was, but it was really, really hard to come back, probably because I had poured my heart out and been so vulnerable for like 3 years growing, and then it's not recognized when you come back. So, but that's not their fault. That's nobody's fault. That's just the realities of life. They're not watching you grow and change and work through all of this pain. They're just, oh, this is Jon, he's still Jon. But there is the noticing of it, but I don't think people have the language for it, and I don't think it's the normal thing to do. Like I don't see all of my friends going on such an intense journey. Like I think everyone grows to a certain extent, but I think I've chosen kind of like I live to self-growth because I'm wanting this for other people. So I think I've kind of quite intensely made sure that I really, really go after this stuff because I want to help other people go through this stuff. So I've probably dived in a lot more than other people might.
But but having done that, I mean, I know the answer to this. Do you regret it?
I'm so grateful. I'm like, gosh, I don't know what I would be if I didn't do that.
Well, and that's it. Like that process you've gone through, and I think that's it. That's the best way to describe it. I was talking to someone recently. It's a process. This whole thing is a process. It's a journey. Like, it's never finished. Like you said, like you've been on 3 years. What sounds like 3 years, quite intense personal development. That might have hopefully like you said, fast tracked and catalyzed some change. But like, we all go through these life transitions. Like you said, this pandemic has brought you back to Cornwall, where there's a lot of triggers. So actually, like, that wasn't expected for you, I assume. I assume you're, you know, coming back to Cornwall will be limited to kind of holidays, maybe Christmas, where you can manage it in your head. Whereas now, like you said, it's great to be there, but at the same time, it's a place where you need to deal with stuff that goes, you know, the associated things that Cornwall or another geographical place provide you as well. And yeah, it's I can imagine it's very tricky at the moment. Like, and it's interesting, you were talking about therapy. Would be interested to hear your experience, not necessarily on therapy, but you know, I talk to a lot of people who've been through the whole spectrum of mental health services. Some from, you know, from lighter talking therapies to some much more intensive kind of electrotherapies. What have you found that's worked? What have you found that hasn't worked for you? And I'd be really interested to understand the kind of your kind of everyday routine, your tools, your tips, your techniques, that, you know, someone who might be wanting to go through that journey but hasn't quite made that kind of commitment, because it is a commitment to yourself, it's hard work. What could they start to do to maybe gain a little bit more awareness of themselves?
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think, and I said earlier, a great tool is self-compassion. Another great tool is like growing in self-awareness and growing in just being present and connected to oneself, basically. So what I mean by that is like connected to your heart. Like, our heart is constantly trying to communicate with us and constantly trying to speak to us. And something I used to do all the time was completely ignore what my heart was saying. So if someone asked me to do something, my heart would say no, but my mouth would say yes. I'd be like, yeah, sure, I can do that for you, no problem. It's going to completely inconvenience. I wouldn't say this out loud, but my heart would be like, this is going to completely inconvenience you. You're going to be knackered after this. You're going to be so drained. You're going to resent this person. But yeah, sure, I'll give you a lift 2 hours to the airport when I haven't got time. So I think,
and you know all those things, and it just leads to that frustration, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's like a constant self-betrayal of yourself, basically. So I think growing self-awareness, because the more aware you can become of yourself, like the more you know when you're operating out of your kind of healthy self and your kind of dysfunctional self. Because the reality is, like, we all have areas of brokenness. Like, it doesn't mean we are broken. Like, I try and tell people they're not broken, but we've all got like places to grow in. But there's areas of brokenness that do need other people and do need healing, and that's okay. Like, we're always going to be imperfect. Like, that's why I show off a lot of my imperfections. I don't try and hide my imperfections. I'm like kind of almost proud to show them off, because it's exhausting trying to be perfect. That's the area of Instagram I really don't like, is kind of like the filtered life of Instagram. Like, look how great my life is. Well, it's not. We all know it's not. Let's not pretend it is. So I think
we still believe it.
I know
it's a weird one, isn't it? Like, it's still, you still look at the thing, you're like, your life is not, that's not right. Obviously that's not your life, but we still look at it.
And I think, again, that's the power of our mind. Like, we're actually off Instagram at the moment. I just deleted the app yesterday, just a few days. I don't know how long. Just, I don't know. Sometimes I want to just come off of it, and I need to just reconnect to myself and re-establish why I'm on there and what I'm bringing to people. Like, is what I'm bringing helpful, or am I feeding that comparison? So trying to be as authentic as we possibly can, especially on Instagram. But I think it's because of our mind. Our mind sees something and it sees it as fact, rather than the kind of filtered life.
Well said.
So with regards to your question, like, I think therapy particularly, it depends what kind of, so I've done a lot of kind of talking. I'm a verbal processor, as you can probably tell from how I'm answering these questions. Like, I love just like verbally spilling out my heart, basically. Like, ask me a great question and I'll let you know how I'm feeling verbally. Like, I'm not very good at internally processing. Like, I'm better at verbally. So I think for me, talking therapy was really helpful, and I was able to talk about what was going on in my present life. The type of therapy I'm going to go into is psychodynamic therapy, which much more taps into your subconscious, because I think for me, like, I've done a lot of work on what I'm aware of. Like, I'm aware of how I'm operating dysfunctionally. I'm aware of my kind of conscious thoughts. I'm aware of my circumstances, what's happened around me. But I think for me, I'm wanting to go through something a bit deeper and tap into my subconscious, because so much of what we do every day is completely subconscious, and we're stuck in this area of we're kind of like trapped, just, you know, when people have got annoying habits and they can't actually see them, it's like this is
Yeah.
because they're doing it all out of their, and often
Yeah.
I get really triggered around my dad, for example, because it's like, oh my days, if only you knew what you were doing. But then you can look straight back at yourself and be like, well, John, you're doing exactly the same thing. So for me, it's like, I know there's things that I'm doing in my subconscious that I don't want to do anymore, but I'm not aware of. So psychodynamic therapy is good for that, because they kind of analyze you. It's a long kind of boundary therapy that goes on for sometimes up to 2 years, and it's kind of week by week. So I'm kind of looking forward to delving a bit deeper, but it depends what you're wanting to work through, to be honest. Like some people do cognitive behavioral therapy, which is much more your thought patterns and like changing those negative thought patterns and working on that. There's loads of help out there. I would just say, like, don't overthink it, and just, everyone needs therapy. Literally, I wish everyone was in it. It would be a much better place if everyone was in therapy, and I wish I got it 10 years ago, honestly.
But also at the same time, like, you know, and a lot of the chats we have on here is that, you know, whilst I agree that, you know, a lot of people should go through those talking therapies, like often it is you know, unless you're going, let's say, on the health service NHS, it is a privileged position to be in, because frankly, you know, it's 100 quid an hour. That's expensive. Like, and I know there are alternatives. And I personally would look at it as an investment in yourself. So if you are earning, you know, money, that even if it's not good money, actually, you know, putting, cutting 10 pints on a weekend to 3 pints and using that money to save up to spend maybe on a once a month kind of like self-discovery, personal learning, might be a good use of might be a good use of funds. But like you said, you've got to really want it. And one thing that's really clear from your perspective is that you really want it. Like this is for you, it's like it's not an option. It's like, no, this is the journey that I'm going to take. This is how I want to be. This, you know, and it's also it's how I want to spend my money as well. And I do think that who people are, you can often tell by how they spend their money. You can see those bad habits, because all spending money is an extension of your thoughts anyway. You know, your needs, desires, behaviors, needs, wants. And from your perspective, like, to see that in a person, I think is inspirational and hugely encouraging, that you're deciding to, like you said, put your money where your mouth is, and go inside and generate that form of self-awareness. Now, looking, like, money aside, like, especially like for like therapy and stuff, what do you do on a day-to-day basis that, you know, perhaps other people would find kind of accessible at the same time? Like, what is your process, your kind of day-to-day routine to make sure that your emotional mental health is kept in check?
So one of the things I've realized, like, lately, is busyness is such a like blockage for connecting to ourselves. So because what I was realizing is, like, as soon as I was waking up, I was straight on my phone, and then from that moment until bedtime, I was on my phone by the time I went to bed. But all in between, completely busy. Like, you busy yourself all day, every day, like literally, unless you're really strict and you take out a lunchtime where you're not busying yourself. You're literally on the go the whole time. You're finding something for your brain to do. You're finding something for your mind to focus on. You're finding something for your eyes to focus on. Like, you're constantly thinking, how do I busy myself today? So I mean, it's changed slightly now that I'm in Cornwall, but because I'm down here for an extended, I don't know how long I'm down here for, a lockdown, I guess, and then I'll go back home. But when I was back home, I was very much taking time out in my mornings. And I was basically, it was really weird for me, because I'm such an extrovert as well, and I'm such a doer, but I was basically like challenging myself just to sit there in the kitchen, look out the window with a cup of tea, just for 15 minutes and do like nothing. Just be in your head, and check in with yourself. So it was kind of my morning check-in. It was like, morning, John, how are you doing? How's your heart doing? What do you need today? What don't you need today? How can you take care of yourself today? Like, yourself up for success. So I think doing a morning check-in, like ideally in the morning, a check-in, really helpful. I'm pretty good at, like, knowing what I feel now, but if you're not, there's something called the feelings wheel that I still use sometimes. So you've probably heard of it. It's like a dartboard shape feelings wheel with loads of different feelings on it, and you can kind of check in with how you're feeling, basically. So if you don't know how you're feeling, because we didn't get taught this at school, did we? So we've had to learn it ourselves. Like, go and like check out the feelings wheel on Google, and you basically just check in like, are you feeling isolated? Are you feeling confused? Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling angry, frustrated? Like, what is it that you're feeling?
Yeah.
So I'd encourage people to check in every day, like every day, how are you actually feeling?
Yeah.
And I do multiple check-ins a day. Like I'm constantly asking myself how I'm doing, because I need to know. Like, I need to know if I'm feeling angry, I probably don't want to be around a load of people because I might lash out at them. Or if I'm feeling sad, I need to acknowledge those feelings. So it's giving yourself time every day to check in with how you're feeling and to actually acknowledge those emotions that are coming up.
Yeah. And I think like when you start that process, you know, giving yourself maybe 10, 15 minutes is tricky. Like, yeah, and perhaps you might need a little bit of a nudge.
Absolutely.
You know, a lot of people go and do some meditation, some mindfulness, just to help them to quieten their mind.
Yeah.
But once you're able to do that, like you said, that kind of period, that kind of, you know, check-in or self-reflection every day is really important. Do it at the beginning of your day, checking how you're doing, what you need today, then give yourself what you need, then check almost at the end of the day as well and say, look, how did that day go compared to what you thought it was going to be? And actually, like you said, bringing some self-compassion and so, you know, self-awareness. So actually, yeah, today's been a good day, despite it, we're, you know, being a pandemic and a lockdown. Today's been, in the grand scheme of things, today's been okay. And
absolutely.
I think it's a really nice visual, that that feeling swirl. And for people who don't know, and please say if I've got this wrong, John, you've got this kind of core set of feelings right at the in the center, and then what it does is that every layer of this kind of this circle breaks down into kind of more feelings that you would be able maybe to kind of label yourself. And I think labeling your feelings is really important. And actually, to be honest, I could probably, you know, looking at that wheel, and I've seen that wheel recently, there's probably about 100 emotions around around the outside. I could probably tell you 10. And actually being able to label and understand that a bit better, I think is really important. And therefore, you know that, okay, this is how I'm feeling at the moment. Okay, I know how I can maybe serve that emotion, validate it, and hopefully make myself, if it's negative, feel a bit more positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's giving yourself the chance to clarify what you're feeling. Because like you say, we don't always have the language. We always just think, am I happy or am I sad? Like those are the two things. Am I happy, sad? If I'm sad, that's not good. If I'm happy, it's good. It's like, no, there's so many different feelings. And actually it's less overwhelming, because what we do with what we're doing in our busyness is numbing. We're literally numbing pain. We're numbing our feelings. We're numbing our emotions. We're not wanting to connect with how we're feeling, because a lot of us are running away from our pain. We're running away from emotional trauma. We're running away from childhood trauma. We're running away from current trauma, current pain. We're so good at avoiding pain. And I think, and I haven't talked about this yet, but pain's actually a huge part of my journey. It's like that I've had to address areas of pain in my life. Like, it was painful to have no confidence. It was painful to not feel enough. It was painful to always feel second best. It was painful to be the class clown. Like, all these areas of my life were painful. So normally you don't want pain in your life, you run away from it. But what I've learned is there's actually so much joy in working through your pain. Like, to me now, pain isn't that scary, like emotional pain. It's like, when it comes up, it's horrible. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. But what I've learned is you walk through that pain with your community, with your family, with God, with whoever, and then you walk out the other end and there's joy on the other side of it, and there's growth side of it. So I think happiness in our life, our jobs, our families, our careers, whatever, it's just an avoidance of pain. And that's why it's important to stop. Is your heart telling yourself that you're in pain right now? Do you need to sit in that sadness? Do you need to sit in that grief? Do you need to sit in that loneliness and that isolation? And with the negative feelings, like, it's not about necessarily trying to turn them into positive. It's about sitting in it long enough to acknowledge that it's real and to acknowledge that it's valid. Like, negative emotions are actually totally okay and normal to feel. Often that we need to flip them. And I've always felt like this. I've always felt like, if I'm feeling sad, I need to try and make myself happy. And it's like, yes, to a certain extent, but that sadness is an indicator to how you're feeling and what you need. So it's really just getting okay to sit in negative emotions, positive emotions, and acknowledge that they're there.
And I think you raised that good point.
But the feelings was very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you raised a really good point about like what you need. Like, if you're able to articulate like how you're feeling and therefore what you need, then, you know, it becomes much more straightforward. You go out and give your body or mind what it needs, and that might be a rest, it might be more. And I think what you said earlier about you know, us keeping ourselves busy, like, you know, yes, it turns into a habit, but at the outset, is that busyness, you know, do you fill your life with lots of stuff which is, you know, maybe a little bit more, you know, meaningless because you are in pain? you don't really want to acknowledge it. You don't want to acknowledge these feelings. So you're busy until you're so tired, you go to sleep, and then you wake up and do the same. But I think my challenge, my question to everyone out there is like, is that good enough? Is that the life you want? And if it is, fine, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if it's not, then I think like Jon, I think everyone listening, what I'm listening to when I hear Jon speak is someone who can speak from his heart out in a truly authentic way. Like, he can articulate that, and I think it's powerful and it's engaging. And if you do want to go through that process, you can take it from Jon that it's worth it. Like, it's long, it's painful, and it's never ending. I'm sure you'll get like you said, hopefully in 60 years, Jon, and you'll get to your deathbed, and you'll probably still be going on that journey, but it will be a pretty worthwhile journey at that point.
Yeah, I hope so. I do hope so. But no, it will. And this is what I always say to people. I'm like, you actually don't have to go on this journey. Like, you will get through life without it. I just don't know how fulfilled you will feel. And I don't know how connected to people you will feel. And I don't know how the people around you will feel. Like, another reason I do this is because I want people around me to feel connected to me. I want them to feel loved by me. I want me to be able to impact their life in a emotional way. And the only reason I'm going to be able to do that is if I'm coming from a healthy place. Like, hurt people really, really hurt people. And I've been really hurt by people, and it's horrible. And I've probably hurt people, but healthy people and healed people can heal people. So I think for me, I'm trying to be one of those people that can help, bring healing, bring love, bring restoration to people's lives, and actually teach people that we can live a connected life. We don't have to live this busy, disconnected life, because actually we are here once, and it's a gift that we get to connect with one another. So, but we can't just, like we said at the start, we can't just be that leaf in the wind. Like, you've got to be that firm, like, firmly planted tree that's got roots, that's like weathered storms, that's like been battered but is still standing, where people come and like shelter. So I think it's so worth it. The journey of like self-discovery and healing is so worth it, and I really wouldn't change it. And I'm going to continue on this journey, especially while I'm teaching it. I think it's more important than ever to still be on that journey while you're teaching it. Like, I don't teach this because I've arrived or I've made it. I teach it because I'm passionate about it, and I want to keep talking about it, because these kind of conversations are a part of my journey as well. So
and to us, Jon, your passion radiates off you.
Thank you.
You get everything you say, and I just want to thank you for not only a fascinating, insightful conversation, but just for being so honest at the same time. Like, it's inspirational to hear your journey, what you've gone through, and also how you articulate it. It's so clear, and it's very clear from my point of view that it's so obvious. This is the journey that I do think that everyone will benefit from. And I think, like you said, I think people realize they've got one life, but they don't really realize they've got one life. Like, and I think, depending on how you look at it, I think there's something like, between like 27 and 35,000 days in your life, depending on how long you live. And if you think that the first 5 and the last 5 aren't particularly great, that's not many left. So
absolutely,
and what's the point of living 10 years in the dark, frankly, in the dark, and busying yourself and not knowing what you want to do? Like, because at the end of the day, that end will come, and you want to, be on that deathbed and going, do you know what? I have had a fulfilled life. And I think if we could all get to the end saying, I've had a fulfilled life, and I've connected with and I supported other people through that journey. Like, frankly, I think if everyone in the world did, I think the world will be in a much better shape.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree.
Jon, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
And thank you to everyone listening. You can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just search for Sidekick Community or Psychic Stories and we'll pop up. And please do give us a rating if you like the show. And do check out our free Psychic app for iPhone and iPad, a collection of interactive exercises, tools and tips to help boost your mental well-being. The app enables you to build a personalized well-being toolkit to help you deal with life's ups and downs. Just go to our website, www.sidekick.org.uk, and click the download now button in the header to take you to the App Store. Jon, thanks so much again.
Thank you.